Hey guys, how's it going? How's it going? I guess I'll give my little formal greeting. This is our professionalism PD2, right? Let's see here. But we'll be talking a little bit about professionalism in a I'm sorry, as a crash course, communication etiquette, deliverables, Google Class, because I know you all love it. That's where we'll, assign certain things that need to be completed, of course. Also, that's where you'll turn your assignments in. We'll go over that a little bit later. Just want to touch on it real quick. We'll get a little bit of conversation going about executive summaries. We can pull a couple up, just a forewarning. If you all have your executive summaries somewhat complete and you're willing to allow us to take a look at them to maybe speak on it, give some critiques, minor, right? Don't want to put anyone out there too much. Then yeah, we can do so this afternoon or a little bit later this afternoon. But until then, I'll pass it back to Zoe, I believe.
Yep, you can go ahead to the next slide. Perfect. Okay, so there's just a couple quick announcements for y'all. So one is that in the recap email this week, Jordan is going to be sending a information form for y'all to fill out about being a mentee. I think as hopefully all you know at this point, you're going to be matched with a mentor in this program who's a professional in the Washtenaw community, or actually maybe beyond, because some of them are all over the world. We actually had someone from China last year, which was pretty cool. But basically, just think about what you might want to learn from your mentor. They might be able to talk to you about professional development in general and kind of complement what you've learned here. Or you might want to learn specific industry things. So if you're like, oh, I really want to learn about the auto industry or something like that, we can try and pair you with someone from Toyota. So that's just one example. But please fill it out no later than Sunday, May 9th. Jordan will include all of this in the email. But the more detail that you add, the better. It will help us match you with someone who will help kind of give you information that will be helpful for you to learn. So we want to make sure that the match is as beneficial as possible for both of you. So that's that. And then if you're applying for internships, you'll know no later than May 4th if you'll be interviewing. And I believe as of right now that we've been able to get interviews for everyone who's wanted to interview. But just keep an eye out for emails from us and or potential employers. So if you are interviewing, we'll send your contact info and your executive summary to employers. So like Dallas was saying, make sure those executive summaries are on par. So, and then also the employers will be reaching out to you with either video conferencing information, or they'll let you know that the interview will take place via phone. So, and then lastly, just reflection. So we emailed the other day. Basically, we found that it might actually be easier for y'all to just plan to attend at the same time each week, so you don't have to sign up every single week. So if you have not filled out that reflection sign up form, please do it ASAP. Because reflection is tomorrow. So that being said, if a conflict does come up, you can always let us know and we'll make sure that you get the correct link. So does anyone have any questions about that? I don't think so. All right. Well, I guess we are moving on. Go ahead, Olivia.
So I just wanted to share with y'all some of the aggregated results from the survey that y'all filled out last PD about what it is that you need from yourselves, from your peers, and from program staff in order to have a successful summer. And I will say that the number one thing that was stressed was the need for communication. So y'all need yourselves to be willing to communicate about your needs. You need us to be transparent about details and to communicate with you regularly about what's expected. And you need your peers to be willing to communicate helpful feedback and that sort of thing. So from program staff, you also need for us to be approachable, to provide you with professionalism resources, to provide clarity around due dates, for us to be organized, and to provide accountability and support. And I think those are things that we're all happy to hear and we're all taking seriously as things to implement into the program. I also saw a few people mention Google Calendar. So we're thinking through a couple of different ways that we can provide you with the dates. If you don't mind, if you can put in the chat now, yes, you use Google Calendar, or no, you do not use Google Calendar, that will help me. And by next PD, we will have hopefully at least one option, hopefully two, for people to get organized. From yourselves, you're looking for time management, organization, focus, goal setting, active participation, remembering to do self-care, which is so important, and asking questions. So I challenge you to do one of those things today, to focus, to actively participate, to goal set, or to ask a question. Ideally, you'll do more, but if you can give us one, that would be a great way to start. And from your peers, you're looking for respect, support, feedback, participation, patience, accountability, teamwork, and helpfulness. So hopefully having a sense of what it is that your fellow participants are looking for from you will help you figure out what kind of a person you need to be and to bring to the space. And with that, I will transition. To Dallas.
Was just over here taking a couple of notes. Sorry about that, folks. So we have learning outcomes, right? So as you all can see, we have to be able to, be able to dress, communicate, and interact in a professional setting. We also have to be able to dress, communicate, and interact in a virtual environment, because nowadays those are two completely different things. And I think we may have gotten more accustomed to the second, because that's where we've been for the last year and a half, right? Almost year and some months, almost two, whatever. Be able to write a professional executive summary, which we will touch on today once again. Be able to actually put a little bit of work to it. And, hopefully we'll have, again, some brave young men and women and some good examples to be able to speak about. And I'm going to pass it to Jordan.
Awesome. So I'm going to get us started with a bit of a crash course in professionalism today. And the first thing that we're going to kind of look at is workplace attire and what that is. So ultimately, the short answer is it can really depend, right? So there are different rules for telecommuting, which is like, online, Zoom, that kind of thing, versus in person. And then the rules can also change based on the workplace and even the type of work that you're doing. So there are three major dress types that we kind of see. So the first is professional. And so this is going to be kind of like the most done up you can be. You're thinking suit and tie, a pantsuit, you are dressed to impress. And the second one is kind of a step down from that. It's a middle ground. It's business casual. So this is still done, very nicely. So you have slacks or some sort of nice pant and a nice like collared shirt or a sweater maybe. So it's definitely a little bit more casual than the professional, but you're still done up very nicely for the workplace. And then the last one, which might be new to some of you, is campus casual. So I don't know about you, but my first thought with campus casual is like sweatpants. Not the case here. We're still thinking nice clothing, so nice jeans and like a nice t-shirt or top. So it's still, kind of like an elevated day look where you could give a presentation, speak in front of your peers, that kind of thing. So why is it important to dress up? So there's kind of two different components of this. And the first is telecommuting. So it can seem kind of silly to dress up when you are working from home, but it actually can boost your productivity and help maintain focus. So, when you're dressing the part, it kind of helps you get in that mindset and help you be productive for the day. And my quick little side tangent on this is my fun fact is this also works well for like exams and stuff. So I know in professional development earlier this week, some people said they were taking like the SAT and the ACT. So if you have that coming up and you have the opportunity to dress up, I would definitely recommend because it can help you with those too. Okay. back to the good stuff. So the second part is it maintains a professional perception. So when you are in your home environment, you know, it's not what you would think of like the office, you know, it's your home, it's where you're comfy. But when you're at work and you still have to keep that professional, you know, front up. And so when you're wearing those nice clothes, it just really shows that you're in that professional mindset and setting, even though you aren't in the office space. And then it also just shows that you are complying with company culture. So whatever rules or maybe guidelines they have set, it just shows that you respect those and you're adhering to those. And then it also helps create boundaries. So both for yourself, you know, you're at home, like we said, it can be weird to be working. So when you put on those like professional outfits, it really just helps kind of separate the time you're spending at work from the rest of the time that you're at home doing whatever. And then it can also help just kind of create those professional boundaries too of, okay, I'm wearing my work clothes, you know, this is my work time. So definitely good things to keep in mind for telecommuting. And then as far as in person, it again, just really demonstrates that commitment and respect to the work that you're doing in the workplace. So, you know, they've outlined these rules. So by you yes, I can go a little bit slower. By you doing everything, you're just really showing that you care about the work environment and space and those around you. And then the last quote is, when you look put together, you feel confident and others perceive you that way. And this is so true. And it really just kind of speaks to, if you dress nicely, not only does it impact how you perceive yourself and your own productivity, but then when you are having a productive day and you are in that business attire, it really just helps others see that you're committed to that work, and also kind of encourages them to join in and kind of foster that environment. So definitely good things to consider with attire. Another important part of professionalism is attendance. So there are kind of three different things that we see with attendance in the workplace. So when you're absent, it can actually impact staff-wide productivity because the workflow gets restructured, because things that you're working on, timelines, deadlines that involve others can get rearranged. And so it can really just kind of throw off everyone's schedule for the day and their plans, and have an impact on that total productivity and not just your own like you might think it does. So definitely something to consider. And then kind of tying into that, when you have chronic absenteeism, can actually create bitterness. Your coworkers, your peers have that, repeated stress from their productivity and workflow being interrupted, and it might create feelings of resentment or like we said, bitterness, and this can become especially awkward when management doesn't deal with it as well, because then it kind of just allows things to escalate a little bit and build, and it puts you and your coworkers in kind of an uncomfy situation. So definitely another thing to think about. And then lastly are the staff related costs that come with being absent. So again, when you're chronically absent, it doesn't just impact you, it impacts everyone. So the company might have to look for temporary or more permanent staffing. And so then they have to fund another staff position and salary and all the things that come with that. And so it can impact just their overall costs and how they allocate their funds for that year. So it's very important to be mindful of your attendance, because it's easy to think that it just impacts you, but ultimately it can impact everyone in the workplace. And I think a great example of this, just in my personal life, was I used to work at like the front desk of an office suite at my old college, and the evening before, we had a student who worked the closing until 5, and they just had a little bit too much on their plate, and a lot of times had to end up calling into work. And most of the time people were able to like cover the front desk enough to, you know, make it workable. But I worked the next morning. And so ultimately what happened was the repeated absences week after week kind of caused things to build up. And so I would come in the mornings to not only the work that I was supposed to do, but an additional set of work. And so, you know, I was ultimately able to have those conversations with my, you know, boss, and they were able to handle it. But it just goes to show that, you know, even though it was the day before and, you know, seemed unrelated, it really did have a big impact on the operating, you know, of the office and my own productivity. So definitely something to keep in mind. And then kind of going into that, like I said, I talked to my boss. It's so important in the workplace to have communication. It's a sign of a high performing culture, and it really is just, you know, it shows an exchange of information and ideas. And when you're doing this in the workplace, it's nicely called workplace communication, easy name to remember. And so something that's good to keep in mind is that workplace communication might be different than the normal communication that you use in your regular day-to-day lives or with your peers. And effective communication occurs when a message is sent and received accurately. And I really think it's important to emphasize that as well, because, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about how to, you know, construct emails and use that professional language. But if you're not following through with the action to make sure that whoever you're sending it to can receive it properly, then all that work you're putting in on the front end really isn't going to benefit you or them. So just making sure to kind of think about communication as, you know, a two-way or multiple way relationship rather than just you doing that singular action. So why is it so important? It really helps avoid confusion. So when you're having those exchanges and that conversation, it really just gives you the opportunity to clarify and confirm things. So you're avoiding any miscommunication that could, you know, lead to confusion down the road. It gives you a purpose. It builds a positive company culture, which we've kind of talked about as well. Just, you know, maintaining that environment is so important for everyone and their productivity and the success. So having that communication really just fosters that environment and encourages people to collaborate more. And then it creates accountability, which is also great and something you might not think about, but it just really helps people confirm what they're responsible for and what others are responsible for, and can, you know, increase the responsibility and that accountability that people experience, and helps you also maintain it with others, because it's always good to be accountable for yourself, but it's also good to be accountable for those around you. So emotional intelligence is another component of professionalism. So what is it? It is the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflicts. So it's just really that idea of, you know, being more in tune to the emotional components of the workspace, both yourself and others. And some common attributes of emotional intelligence are self-management, which we've kind of talked about a little bit previously in professional development, but it's just really that idea of taking responsibility of your own behaviors and well-being, and kind of, you know, not only managing your day-to-day tasks and the actual physical tasks you might have for work, but, you know, those emotions and everything that's going on in your life. And then that kind of ties into self-awareness, which is more specifically focused on being, you know, cognizant of your emotions and what you're feeling, and really acknowledging them. And so that, you know, helps, like it says, the definition, relieve stress and communicate effectively. When you can take the time to really understand where you're at, it helps you move forward with your actions and how you're kind of going to proceed with whatever you're working on. And next, social awareness. So that's being in tune to the environment around you in a more emotional capacity. So being able to pick up on, social cues, moods, the vibe, if you will, just really being able to kind of understand the environment of the office and what that's like. And that'll help you also when you're practicing self-awareness, you can kind of figure out where you're at and then how you fit into the social space of the office. And then lastly, relationship management. So really just the idea, kind of like it says, of maintaining those relationships, which, sounds easy, but I think in the day-to-day of things, it can, slide to the side. So just really making sure to put in the work, put in the time and effort to communicate with those that you have the relationship with and maintain it, and make sure that not only are you getting your needs met through the relationship, but does the other people involved, is it working for them as well? Because again, it's a dynamic of individuals and not just about the individual experience that you have when you're thinking about it in this context in the workplace. Another thing that comes with professionalism is feedback. And so there are kind of some tips and tricks that we have for receiving feedback. So the first is try to control your defensiveness. So when you are getting feedback, it's meant to be a positive experience. So feedback is, or it should be, constructive. It's meant to help you move forward and make, positive changes. And ultimately, whoever you're working with and is providing that feedback, it probably is beneficial for them as well. So it's typically, constructive. So when you are receiving it, it's good to be calm and not defensive and take it as an attack, because it shouldn't be personal. And when you go in with that mindset, it can kind of create like some tension then if you respond inappropriately in that scenario. So definitely just try and, remain calm and keep an open mind. And then the second is listen to understand. And I always follow it up with not to respond. So it's really just the idea that when you are getting that feedback, that you should be listening to learn and not thinking about what you're going to say next, which I think it's kind of natural instinct to think, okay, what am I going to say in response to all that they're like telling me? But feedback, like I said, is meant to be a constructive experience. And so you really just want to take the time to make sure that you're processing it. And if you need to take a moment after they've given you the feedback to say like, I just need to think it over before you respond, totally okay. It's just important that you're not rushing ahead and missing that, because then you can miss small details. Suspend judgment. So that kind of ties back into the defensiveness of feedback is, supposed to be constructive and help you make changes. So it's not a judgmental experience. So don't feel like you are being judged, and don't place judgment on others as well. It's just kind of a judgment-free zone is a good rule. And then lastly, summarize and reflect what you hear, which really just speaks to kind of like I said, with listening to understand. When you are, done getting that feedback, state what you've learned back kind of, and just communicate your understanding. And that goes back to that, like avoiding any confusion and clarifying. So it really helps you solidify your understanding. And then if they have any additional input, or maybe there was a miscommunication, you can clarify and really just make sure that you're on the same page. And then ask questions to clarify. So like I said, you don't understand something in the feedback, don't be afraid to say, can you explain this more? Can we take a moment to look at this in, further detail? I just, don't quite understand, because it's meant to be constructive for you and you're using it to make changes. So you definitely want to clarify rather than just, guessing and being completely wrong. And then asking for examples. So when you do need that clarification, or if you're not sure, don't be afraid to ask for examples or stories. This is a good tool, especially if you're like a visual learner or something. I know I am, but I just sometimes the concepts are hard for me to understand unless I have an example. So utilizing them, they know what they're looking for, so they can illustrate that for you. And that can really help you better understand what you're supposed to do moving forward. And then remembering that not everyone may share that perspective. So just, again, kind of remembering you're an individual. We all have different backgrounds and experiences that create a unique identity. And so what one person's perspective might be is also different from someone else. So feedback might be coming from a different perspective than yours. And so that's a good opportunity if, there is maybe you see a difference of perspectives to clarify or communicate and further that understanding as well. And then just being approachable. I think, it's hard to give feedback and get feedback, but you want to make sure that you are, being open to it, and then you're able to encourage others to approach you and discuss it, because ultimately it helps everyone get better. And so when you have kind of that unapproachable component about it, sometimes it can kind of impede moving forward and making change. And we don't want that because, like I said, feedback is good. It can be scary, but it is definitely good. And then workplace norms. So this is kind of the last thing that we'll look at in professionalism today. But workplace norms, I will read this down in the corner. It is: group norms are a set of agreements about how team members will work with each other and how the group will work overall. These agreed upon behaviors allow the team to increase its collective performance through healthy debate and clarity of purpose and roles. So really this idea of group norms, there's, just a set of guidelines, standards, kind of maybe even unspoken rules that create the environment in that workplace. And they're kind of more formal and more informal norms. So those formal ones are going to be probably more written or maybe spoken things. And then informal might be something more casual or unspoken that's just kind of like an understanding. So what are some of the benefits of having team norms? It can help you avoid office politics. As we know, that can get sometimes a little messy. So just having those norms really avoids any conflict between people or individuals, and any dynamic that comes out of that can be cause tension or conflict. Always good to try and navigate around that. And then just going back to, it can help contribute to that high performing work team. So it can just really create a more cohesive dynamic among the group and contribute to that overall productivity. And then it creates a sense of ownership. So when you have those norms, it kind of helps you lock into that space and understand and just feel like you belong there, which can seem kind of strange, but if you think about it in the context of maybe the norms in a workplace are, super, you have really positive people, employees, expectations, when you have those norms in place, then when you get there, you're excited to be there. It just really creates that sense of belonging for you, and you understand what's happening in that environment. So it's definitely good for that ownership. And then avoiding dysfunction. And so dysfunction is kind of the idea that things are maybe chaotic or unorganized, just kind of not cohesive or together. And so workplace norms, again, really just help set that kind of base for everyone, so that everyone's on the same page, everyone feels comfortable where they're at, what they're doing, and you can avoid any conflict or unorganization that can then, impair productivity or anything like that. So that wraps up professionalism. And next, I am going to hand it off to Olivia, and she will dive into the next section for us.
Hi all. So I'd love to talk with you a little bit about why we should follow proper etiquette on Zoom and maybe what some of those norms are. So we're going to take a closer look at manners for teleconferencing. And I'm wondering first if anyone here who has spent, I know the vast majority of us have spent the last year or so doing Zoom for school or work. What are some of the norms or tips or manners that you've picked up? If you want to come off of mute or drop it in the chat, that would be a good behavior to follow. And I'll start with Allison. I see your hand up.
Well, I know a couple, like having your camera on, being muted during a session like this. Trying to think of like one more. Like showing your face. I know like a lot of teachers are like, hey, I really want to see your face, and I can't see your face if your camera's off. But those are a few I could think of.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Joe said in the chat, make sure you're muted if you're doing something that no one needs to hear. I very much agree with that. And Allison, or anybody really, why do you feel like turning the video on is important? Yeah, so Joe says it's just more personal. I agree. It helps this be a little bit less of a really alienating and unfamiliar process where we can feel like strangers the entire time. Kai, I see your hand.
I'd say for something like school, especially, and I guess even something like this, it gives off the impression you're at least, engaged and committed, like with your focus. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jordan, can we get the next slide? Thank you very much. Sabina says, keeping your camera on also makes it easier to stay engaged. I very much agree that that is true for me too. So does someone want to come off mute and read us this first tweet?
I can do it. Just talking to my cat in the middle of 68-person Zoom meeting. I wasn't muted. Send a meteor.
I do think that that might be the only appropriate option for our friend Daniel. After that, oh, Ira says if the cat was cute, it's all good though, right? I totally agree. Yes, it's true. I do want to see more pets on Zoom. Next slide. And one more volunteer, please.
I'll read it.
Great.
1 year into this Zoom life, and I forgot to turn off the camera when I took my computer to the bathroom with me. Didn't realize till my pants were down. Regular Zoom panelists. Was I visible to just the 15 other panelists or to the attendees too?
Yikes. So we do know that, our friend Courtney here was visible to the attendees as well, which is pretty rough. This semester, I worked at a University of Michigan office in student services, and we had a student that got kicked out of class for using the restroom during class accidentally and not realizing that he was unmuted and had his camera on. So it does cause problems and is a reason to not take your computer with you, or as Joe said earlier, not do anything you don't want people to see you doing while you're on Zoom. Next slide. So as a quick sort of crash course for us, the biggest do's that you should follow are to call on time and from a quiet place if you can, and to use headphones when possible, because that will help keep background noise out, and it will help your sound transmit more clearly, and it'll keep you a little more focused from whatever else is going on around you. Whenever you're coming off mute, you want to say your name quickly before speaking. I think it helps people remember who's in the space and get oriented to who's there with them. It's just a little bit more professional. And that's especially important, I think, if you're on a conference call ever at work where we can't see your face or we don't have your name there. And it's okay in this space if you haven't done it. I think that advice comes mostly from conference calls. So we do get the name tags here, but I think it can help a little bit if it's the first time you're talking in a session. You also want to prepare your documents beforehand and have them ready to go so that you're not all over the place, and stick to the agenda. So it can be really easy, I think, in our Zoom landscape to get distracted by what's around us or what's in our space. And so having an agenda and sticking to it can help. And there have also been some really interesting studies that if you provide people an agenda beforehand, they're actually more relaxed as the meeting goes on, and they have more availability to use their brain processing power for the actual substance of your meeting. So when people have an agenda, they spend less of their cognitive load wondering what's going to happen next, and it makes for more engaged participants. So if you're ever the one in charge of planning a meeting or leading a meeting, having that agenda really helps. And then you want to pay attention and participate as much as possible and in the ways that feel most comfortable to you to show that you're engaged and to respect your fellow participants. Next slide. And then this sort of crash course in don'ts. You want to avoid using your phone or your laptop for things that are not the meeting while you're on the meeting. So if I'm sitting here and you can see me doing this while Jordan is talking, that is really rude and it doesn't respect Jordan's time at all. And so that's why I am engaged and paying attention, because that's what she needs from me as a colleague this summer. I do agree that social media is super fun, but it can wait the 1.5 hours, I think. Plus the endless scrolling is really only damaging your internal belief in yourself and your confidence. I think we're getting a little caught up in these other people's fake lives. Don't eat on camera. You also, like I said, don't want to complete other tasks. Don't use the restroom. We promise to try to put in a small break at least in all of our meetings so that people can take that sort of personal break for a moment and get a drink or anything like that, kind of to avoid those really sticky situations. And then finally, this is the big one, I think. So don't message things that you don't want everyone to read. One, if you're trying to direct message someone, I think it has happened to many of us that you accidentally message to everybody instead of messaging directly. So there's that, like if you're gonna do it, double check that you're sending it to the correct recipients. And then two, when the meeting is over, all the hosts of the meeting can see all the messages that were exchanged during the meeting, even the ones that were, private between two participants. So that one is one you don't want to find out the hard way. So I'm hoping that that kind of sticks now and is something you can kind of take with you moving forward. Next slide, please. And now I will transition to Sade.
Awesome. Thanks, Olivia. Hi, everybody. To transition a little bit, keeping all of these great things in mind about your etiquette and things like that, we're going to transition to talking a little bit more about your upcoming deliverables over the next few weeks and Google Classroom, which I'm sure you have a lot of questions about. So first, we'll start by talking a little bit about Google Classroom, sorry. So some of you may already be familiar with Google Classroom. Maybe you have used it for school or something like that already. But we're just going to touch on some of the main points of Google Classroom and what we're going to be using it for this summer. So essentially, Google Classroom, I always get tongue-tied saying it, so excuse me in advance. But it's essentially intended to help facilitate your virtual learning this summer. So we're going to be using it quite a lot. We're going to be posting reminders on the classroom site. So you definitely want to make sure you get logged in and you are very familiar with it. It's going to be a centralized hub. It's going to be kind of your go-to place for resources and professional development slides. Again, we'll be posting key dates and things like that as well. So you definitely want to get logged in, be familiar with it. It's also going to be an easy place for you to give feedback to program staff. If you ever have anything that you want us to know or want to communicate with us, feel free to give us feedback via Google Classroom. And then also we'll be giving you feedback via the classroom as well. So a really great place to give and receive feedback.
All right, folks. So some of you may deem this familiar. This may be brand new to others. I'll go a little bit more into detail in a moment, but what it's called and what it is, it's a Cooter journey, right? So let me just break away for 2 seconds. For those of you who think you know what you want to do within, let's say, the next 2 to 3 years of life, that could be high schoolers, that could be those in college, just put a yes in the chat for me. Just simply put yes, you know what you're doing. And if you don't, you can put no, right? So the reason I'm doing that is this assessment kind of helps you determine where your skill sets lie, where your interests, where some of your interests may lie. And even when you think that you know where they are, it can change, right? It's not something that, oh yeah, I have to because this assessment said, but it gives good suggestions based upon some answers to a couple of questions, right? And personal experience, maybe from when I was 10, 8, 9, 10, somewhere young like that, all the way throughout college, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Got all the way to school, dabbled with some engineering, and decided between the school and the major, it wasn't for me. So I did a complete 180, went to a different school, jumped into a whole different program, and found some success. But either way, this Cooter journey takes about 20 minutes to complete. It's 3 assessments. It's an interest assessment, skills confidence assessment, and a work values assessment. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. Okay. So with these 3 assessments, right, you'll complete the interest, you'll complete the skills, and you'll complete the work values. Then you'll complete a Cooter reflection on your very, very favorite platform, Google Classroom. That allows you to kind of take a look back and to see what results were generated, right? What it also allows you to do is kind of what I was getting at a moment ago. For those of you who know what you're doing, right, who know what you want to have the interest in, who knows what program you want to enroll into and all of that good stuff, you can kind of make the comparison, right? This is what I thought I wanted to do, but this is what Cooter suggests I could do. And you kind of can, look within yourself and figure out how to, what to do with those feelings. Either or. This is due June 7th, 2021. Your reflection on your results should include a reflection on your results and a deep dive, there it is, into the pathways recommended for you. You'll discuss these results at reflection with your team.
Thanks, Dallas. Okay, so just to touch on the executive summary briefly, as a reminder, your executive summary is due on May 2nd, and the assignment will open up on Google Classroom today at 5. But in case you're wondering exactly what is the executive summary, it's essentially a mini resume. So you want to use it as a place to highlight your skills and accomplishments, as well as any career interests that you may have. Just as your resume will be tailored for a specific job that you might be interested in, you definitely want to use your executive summary to do the same. So if you're interested in one of the graphic design internship positions, you want to kind of highlight that in your executive summary. Let's see. what exactly are we using these for in this program? So for those of you who are going to be interviewing for an internship, we are going to be sending these out to the potential employers to view and just learn a little bit more about you before the interviews. For those of you who may not be interviewing for an internship this summer, the executive summary is still important. It's just going to be really helpful for you later this summer if you go ahead and get it done now. Because later we're going to be fleshing these out into larger resumes. And that resume you can take with you as you apply to other jobs after this program, or if you apply to any colleges after this program, you can always take that resume with you after this summer. So either way, it's going to be really helpful to go ahead and get it done. If you want to get any feedback on your executive summary, if you've already started working on yours, we are going to have some time in breakout rooms in just a second where Dallas, Jordan, and Olivia and I will be able to give you some feedback if you're interested. Let's just, sorry, one more thing. Don't forget that your executive summary is a place where you are able to stand out as well from other applicants. So as I'm sure you know, there's quite a few participants in SummerWorks. So these employers are going to be looking at a lot of these executive summaries before the interviews. So don't forget it's a place for you to stand out. And again, you do want to highlight your skills and accomplishments in it as well. So now we are going to break out into breakout rooms for the remainder of the time. And I think Zoe is going to do that for us.